Hey guys, DMS here. Today I'm going to keep it simple. I have my normal camera sitting right over here, and I'm trying something kind of different. I'm just going to get straight to the point, talk about these headphones, and we're not going to do any fancy B-roll or anything like that. I'm just going to show you guys exactly what I'm talking about. So this is a review of the Takstar HF580. This is a super cheap planar. I think around $150-ish on AliExpress, though I could be wrong on the exact number of that price, but somewhere in that ballpark. Now, a lot of people have been saying that this is a cheaper version of the Cindy Iva. So I have them both here. I've been listening to both of them a lot, and here is what I think. So right off the bat, let's just talk about the build of this thing. It's built pretty well. The headband right here, the mechanism to adjust it, there's definitely a lot of friction in there. There's no clicks. I think this will probably wear down over time, but it's pretty sturdy. I don't think it's going to die from a drop or anything like that. The yokes and everything across this are made of metal. Nothing feels like it's going to snap. It honestly feels like a better built version of the old HF580 HE400 with different shaped ear cups on it, and definitely a little bit thicker metal all the way across the board, which is nice. I definitely do not worry about the build of this thing, though I wish the cables were detachable, because that's kind of a downside. If this wears out, you're going to have to do some sort of mod or self-repair to fix that. The headband itself is a little bit thin and could definitely be thicker. This is a pair I got from Zeos, who he got it from JDM Watt, and he put these nuggets on top. That definitely helps. You can get these from Dakoni. Without that, I don't think I'd be able to wear this for any realistic length of time. That's definitely for sure. So that's definitely worth noting. I have the pads off right now. There's two sets of pads, a pleather perforated pad and a velour pad. These definitely both change the sound, though I kind of don't recommend either sets of pads. If you can, I would get the Shure 1540 pads. For me personally, this just isn't quite big enough on the inside of the ear cup, and my ear does not comfortably rest within it. It's a little bit shallow, but I never ended up touching the driver, which is nice. But the 1540 pads definitely help with both comfort and sound, and they're pretty cheap. So Nuggets, 1540 pads, and a cable mod would definitely be your starting points if you plan on considering this headphone. So let's talk about sound. Bass is extended well, but slow. It's not particularly fast bass. It's not particularly tight bass, but it's not bloomy, it's not bloated, it's not muddy. It's just slow and unimpressive. Like I said, though, it does extend well, so at least there is that. The mid-range is reasonably lush on these. This is kind of where this headphone stands out more than anything, is its mid-range performance. However, it's worth noting that the upper mid-range starts to dip down, and so does the lower treble. And then there's a spike again around like 10K. But this dip is super apparent when listening to these headphones, and so is the spike. The 10K spike can really kind of grate on me at times. It depends on the music I'm listening to. Better mixed tracks tend to not be sibilant, but you can get sibilance when you're cranking these up some. Though honestly, it's hard to expect a lot better at this price point from a planar. I think that this driver is probably a little bit more resolving, a little more detailed than a T50, but a T50 stock is definitely much more level in its frequency response. Now, this is also a larger driver than a T50, and it actually delivers a larger sound. Sound stage on these kind of sits somewhere right around here. It's not super intimate, it's not super far away, but it sounds like there's just a little bubble right around your head where the music is playing, and it kind of gives a bit more of a roomy sound, though it never seems to cross too far inward or outward. It just seems like everything stays in one place right out here. So there's not a lot of depth to it, but there is still a bit of an image. Imaging in itself is, I mean, it leaves a little bit to be desired. It seems to get a little bit more vague around the center, but there it is definitely still a center, but the center just seems to be any space inside of your head, so to speak. Imaging outside of that was more than acceptable for things like gaming, but I wouldn't recommend it over the Audio-Technica AD series, like the AD 900, AD 1000, stuff like that, if you're looking for a headphone for gaming. but this is definitely more fun for music because of the both staging and the extension that you get out of it. Now, the 1540 pads still have that dip, but they definitely provided the most level response out of the 3 pads. But if you introduce a 4th pad, the Cindy Iva's pad, these 2 headphones measure remarkably similarly. And if I take the pad off of this, you will notice that these drivers also look very similar. Here, I'm going to zoom in real quick. It's hard for me to hold these to where you can see it very clearly, but these are very similar drivers, and they measure almost identically. To the point where I would even say that I think that this is either the same driver or it has to be a similarly modeled driver from the same OEM. And with that, I think that the only real acoustic differences between these headphones, if I can get this pad back on here, there we go. I think the only real acoustic differences from these headphones are coming from the differences in the enclosures, because this is a wooden enclosure. It's got slightly, it's hard to see on here, but it is actually slightly less deep than the plastic on there. This is partially see-through. It's a much more open design, which I'll zoom in again real quick here. This is a much more open headphone. You can actually see the wires of the driver down in there, whereas this is a much more dense and not nearly as permeable mesh on the back of the HF580. So I think the differences in material and the differences in dampening are what accommodate for the changes in sound between these 2 headphones. Now that said, I think that the differences in tuning and the differences in dampening do give the Cindy Iva an edge, not only in frequency response, but a little bit more in resolution, simply because I feel like the dampening in this is holding it back. I do think that this could be modded to that point. However, I don't necessarily think that this is a bad thing. The Cindy Iva is a great headphone. It's not a particularly neutral headphone. It does not have a particularly flat frequency response. It's a little bit all over the place, and as is the HF580, but I think that for a modding platform, this would be excellent. I think that this could certainly take up the mantle of the T50, even if people wanted to approach it from that perspective. Stock by itself, I don't think it's a super competitive headphone. I think it's definitely a lot better than the Audio Phantom. That is for sure. But I think that there's a lot of potential here. And I think that there's potential for better frequency responses than the Cindy Iva if you were to find the right modifications to the housing to accommodate for that. So don't jump on the hype train immediately. It's not the best headphone ever. It definitely has its flaws. But I think that it is more than a good contender if you are interested in modding. And if you want a cheap planar, this does give a bigger planar sound than pretty much anything will at its price point, because it is, well, a decent sized planar for its price point. Now overall, I think if you just want a good daily driver headphone and you're spending this kind of money, you should be getting the 5.8X instead. The 5.8X is a much better headphone in almost every way across the board. If you just need a daily driver, get the 5.8X. But if you want something fun to mess around with and you already have other headphones, the HF580 is definitely worth checking out. So that's pretty much all I got for you guys. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please leave a like down below. Comment letting me know what you want to see in the future. And if you want early access to videos like this one, the Patreon will also be linked in the description, as well as the community forum. Anyway, until the next one, guys. Peace.